why do we have this pricing? What is our narrative around our pricing? And I think we got back to that. So without doing all the features and functions, all the plans, all the variants, all the ifs and buts, all the limitations, but rather like, why do we price the way we do?
Yo, mic check. What's up, everybody? You're listening to the Street Pricing Podcast, the only show where proven SaaS leaders share their mindset and mistakes in pricing so we can all stop guessing and start growing. Enjoy, subscribe, and tell a friend. Now, let's break it down with your host and sought-after slayer of bad pricing, Marcos Rivera.
What's up and welcome to the Street Pricing Podcast. I'm Marcos Rivera, author, founder, and CEO of Pricing.io. And today's guest is going to be good because this person is driving a lot of usage-based pricing in the field and trying to move us away from complexity and more towards clarity. Today, I have Niclas Lilja, who is the CEO and founder of Younium. Niclas, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Marcos. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for jumping on here and talking to us. I know you have a lot of thoughts in your head. You see so many pricing and packaging models out there, and a lot of companies even trying to shift to usage-based. So first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about you and what you do.
At Younium, we do what's called subscription management and billing. I think in reality, it's really we provide a platform for B2B SaaS and software companies where they can manage their revenue streams. So what does it mean? Well, all the way from if they do like quoting for a sales-led growth motion, or it could be like online sales if you do like more of a product-led growth motion, but then all the way to management of contracts, data mediation, billing of recurring and usage, revenue recognition, and then producing insights as well. So it's very much in that area of like, how do you execute on your pricing and how do you actually put this into practice?
Yeah, and this isn't your first rodeo. You've actually been involved in another successful SaaS company. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks. So I was with a company called Medius. Sometimes I say that it was very much like supplier invoice automation. So I went from from one side of the receivables, the accounts payable, into accounts receivables. So, but that was a great journey. Started off early with like being employee, maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 something. And towards the end, before I got going with Younium, we were at 200 plus people from Australia to the US. So, and I think they are still really doing great. So, yeah, it's an awesome team.
I love it. I love it. From AP to AR, there's so much opportunity for technology to step in and help fix that. And even as we get more complex, as software gets more complex, therein lies the opportunity as well. Like, how do we take that complexity, bring clarity, as I was saying in the beginning? So would love to have you get street with me, man. Are you ready?
Sure. Let's get going.
Okay. So here's what we're going to do, right? For all the listeners here, this show is based on the book Street Pricing. So a little bit of a roadmap for you. So we start off with Rewind, which is a pricing story, a struggle, a success, something that really teaches all of us about what really happens when you're trying to change or update or move pricing along. And then we go from Rewind to Play. And that's really about what's happening today, present day, what's working. And then we'll unpack that a little bit. And then we'll do Fast Forward, which is, okay, where's pricing going? What do we have to look forward to in the future? All right. So that's kind of how we structure. Then I throw in my favorite question at the end, which Niclas, I think we'll all have fun with. But with that, let's start off with that pricing story. Niclas, take it away.
Thanks. Yeah, so I thought we would go back to the initial struggles that I guess all entrepreneurs have when they get going. And for me, I had spent quite a lot of time in like pricing, packaging. So I had a lot of expectations on myself, and to really do great things from the start and not get caught with the problems that I've seen before. So really, taking on those learnings. But still, like early days, you don't really know exactly where you fit in, how you're going to do it, how you're going to price it. You definitely need to iterate. And I was, trying my best to sort of, I guess it's like a mix of you trying to pick up on, a few trends, maybe a bit of copying others in the field as well. And then being, smart as well as I try to be. And also, like, having a platform is not only one use case; it's quite many different use cases. So you can imagine when I got going with this, the spreadsheet, it was growing in all dimensions, and it was just becoming super, super complicated. And I had a number of stabs at this, like just feeling like, okay, if we just can get this into place and then, everything working, we can present it and they will think, oh, this looks really thought through. This is great. We understand. But I never really got there, right? I just felt like I was ending up in negotiations and, the either like very detailed question, what does this mean? Or, what happens if this happens, and really getting deeper and deeper, or just like plain negotiations. It's like, it's too expensive. it's the only way that goes. And I did a number of different shifts, and we're trying a bit more of a land and expand. We were trying like, no, maybe that is not working. Maybe do like a bit of everything. And we had a number of different variants of this. But I think like what really changed it was really going back a step and think about like, why do we have this pricing? What is our narrative around our pricing? And I think we got back to that. So without doing all the features and functions, all the plans, all the variants, all the ifs and buts, all the limitations, but rather like, why do we price the way we do? And be very, very clear on that. And so for us, it was like, okay, so the best proxy for us to the value we provide is where the prospective customer is at ARR.
Okay.
Or ARR plus usage. Because typically if you would grow their business 100%, they would have at least twice the work. It could even be more than twice the work, because it tends to grow exponentially.
Right.
So we try to, find a proxy towards that. We try to be super, super clear that we don't want to be, a percentage of your revenue. We don't want to, charge for anything that others are already solving. So, for instance, we took away one-time fees.
So no
you can
one-time
manage
fees.
one-time fees in any accounting platform or anywhere. So let's take that out of the question. We also felt like a lot of companies were doing, revenue under management, basically taking the full amount of each and every invoice or billed amount and just putting that together, and felt like, okay, so we're basically would then be charging for tax and VAT and other things that are really not related to any of the value we provide to the customers, right? So we took that away as well. So we tried to do a few things, but really having this discussion, and then the number of legal entities as well, because if you're having 50 legal entities across the world, that's another thing than one entity. So when we started having those discussions or presenting like, okay, so going into a dialogue and being a bit prepared, sort of, this is roughly the price point without any details, but also telling, okay, and this is how we reason. All of a sudden we got other discussions going, and we got to learn more things and understand, oh, I don't see it like that, or oh, I see it as a tax on my revenue, or I don't think, and what happened. And that really led us to do it a bit better, but really understand like, what is the price position that resonates with our buyers, and also like, do they see that we correlate with them being successful? So if they grow their ARR, are we part of that?
So I don't disagree. I actually think that there's a lot of value in asking those questions and in figuring out the why you're pricing versus the why would lead you to the what, right? So you have to get super clear in there. A lot of founders kind of skip over that part. Don't you find, Niclas, that they just kind of get to the number?
I do, and I think like in so many ways you need to sort of overachieve in the beginning, right? Maybe the product isn't perfect, maybe the team isn't fully sized. So I think we're all in that mode of like, having to present something rather than engaging dialogue sometimes. So maybe that's one of the reasons why we sometimes skip that. But I do think like, if you have the why and you sort of find where it resonates, you can sort of also pick up on some other cues, like maybe this, maybe there is something that you can add on to your price model, but really start from a very, very simple pricing model. Basically, what's the right price?
Yeah, you
And
were
then
peeling it
sort of
back.
evolve from that. But it's difficult as well. I think we have to be humble enough to say that as well. I mean, it's difficult, but I think like talking about pricing can be really a vehicle for learning and finding your fit and see like, okay, maybe you also see like this company. So sometimes we were meeting with companies, they were reselling things, right? So all of a sudden they had a margin of, let's say, 5% in the end. Then it's really tough compared to if you have, a margin as with software and SaaS of maybe like 80-90%, right? When we then price on AR. So that was one level. Okay, maybe either we have to find a separate price plan for that segment, or maybe we shouldn't try to serve them. There's also always these like things that you can pick up and learn from. So I think, but if you don't talk about the why and you don't have the narrative, you're not really inviting anyone to give you feedback, right?
Yeah, you can't, and that's the golden piece that you need, right?
It is. And I think pricing also really, keeps it real, right?
As real as
Unless
it
you have the
gets.
pricing component, we can all talk about, yeah, I would like that, and this would be nice, and but if you put a price on it, it becomes real. It's like, well, maybe I don't really need this, but this, on the other hand, this is super, super important. And if I only had this particular piece of something, then I would definitely pay this price. So you will get much more reality, I think, if you couple this to pricing.
You triggered a thought in my head that just when you said that, because when you were peeling back, like, we're not going to charge for that, we're not going to charge for this, right? You were just really honing in on that fairness, the exchange, right? Understanding. But in that process, you probably decided maybe we should serve these types of customers versus these other types as you were learning. But then as you hone down and sort of narrow your focus, then you start asking different questions. And it's this cycle that goes back and forth. Is that what really happened when you did that? When you started digging into the why and going deeper? Did you find a sharper who?
I think so. I mean, looking back, we've always been talking a lot about like ideal customer profile, and I have to like, I do think this was a very crucial part of that, because, as I said, you really get good answers, and I mean, I do think like on one hand you could say like in the beginning you're only in it for the learnings. You don't need to charge anything. Maybe the first few customers, that could be one take on it. But I do think like having companies that pay for your service keeps it real. You
Yeah,
have to deliver. It's worth something. It's for real, and I think we definitely took away a lot of like sub segments that we thought we wouldn't win in the beginning. So definitely. So I think the whole like ICP and like definition of that become clearer through this pricing process as well. Definitely.
yeah. But it's not like it took some time, man. Like, how long did all that take? It doesn't happen overnight, is what I tell folks. Our pricing takes a bit of time and effort, right? How long did that take you in that journey?
I think for us, like the first 2 years probably, because I guess it depends on how many customers you're attracting in a given period of time, and for us, like as I said, we're doing a platform. It's very much of a binary decisions for CFOs, like, are we going to do this, are we not going to do this, or if it's a CRO or whoever. So we didn't have that many price points or wins in the beginning. So that also, I think, led to, so if you're doing like B2B enterprise sales from the start, or you're doing like a sales-led growth motion, I think maybe you can get customers earlier, but I don't think it scales as quickly. Like if you really hit the spot with something that's product led, maybe that's. I guess there are downsides to that as well. But maybe when you really find, your thing, it takes off a bit quicker and you get more data points. But I think it takes times, and it's like it's so easy looking back and saying how it was, but when you're in it, it's never as clear, right?
Oh, never, never. No, but
You have to look back.
you have to look back. And let me ask you this: if you were looking back, would you do anything different? Would you do more or less of something looking back?
I think maybe even more extreme. It's very easy to be caught up with like what it should look like, or you should always have a few different plans, so the prospective customer can choose between. Really think like trying to be true to yourself and see like what makes sense to you. I think I would be a bit tougher on that and maybe do a bit less. This another time around. I do think that you should like review pricing very frequently when it comes to like the price point. But there's a trade-off like when it comes to changing the model, right? In the beginning, so I think like getting enough customers is probably more important than finding the perfect price model in the beginning. So I'm thinking like that. Then you have enough price points and you have enough data, and then you can get going. But like finding something that works, I mean, that's a big step in the beginning. So I would focus on that, and then I would keep it maybe a bit longer, and then do a bigger change, something like that. But
More
it's
focused, do it
details
longer.
maybe.
It's always in the details, right? But what I'm listening to you here, like, it's getting super clear on that why, right? Then having the conversations that help justify the why, narrow it down, and those were hard, right? You had to sit there and talk to them and get the feedback, and then you calibrate once you have enough data, right?
Yeah.
So it's clarity, right? It's conversations, and it's calibrate. We just made a framework, man. Just
Correct.
me and you talking.
Fantastic.
Super, man. No, I appreciate that. One big lesson, like again, a founder sitting in front of you, he or she's about to launch something, and your biggest advice on what you learned in that pricing and packaging journey.
With the disclaimer, if it's like more sales-led growth, so you actually have conversations with people, but then I would definitely like find your narrative around why you price the way you do, and share that story and listen to the feedback. I think like we wouldn't have as many companies doing seat-based pricing if they did, right?
Ooh,
There would be something else.
You're right. Actually, that's a really good point. Really good point. Team, I want to take a quick pause here to ask you for a huge favor that'll mean a lot to me. Please review and share the show. Share it with your team, your friends, your peers. Not only will it help them stop the guesswork in pricing, but it'll also help you and increase the chances that you'll take action and change for yourself. All right. Much love. Now back to the show. Let's move us from the rewind now into the play. So what's working today for Younium's pricing, right? You now have some success, you're growing, you're moving into different countries. What's working?
I do think like we've been into like positioning, and I think positioning has been really a big thing for us. Price is super important in like the whole positioning exercise. So I think like for us with our pricing right now, we have the right position. So we see ourselves as product leaders in our niche, and I think we're priced according to that. So that's the biggest thing I would say, but also like simple and fair. I think we talked about that a bit earlier as well, like how we've seen, we don't really want to charge for one-offs. We don't want to do taxes and VATs or whatever. We want to like try to be as close as success as we can get, and price on that, and so we can also align with our customers. What success looks like. We do, I would say, the majority of recurring pricing, but we do also have some variable fees. but I think like all in all, simple and fair, and quite easy to understand. Like if you grow 100%, the price. There are no surprises in that. So like those three things I think are working well today. But you can never really settle though, can you?
No, you can't.
Just
It
because it
doesn't
works
stop.
today, it doesn't mean it works tomorrow, right? But
Yeah, it's iterative. You got to keep on pushing. And here's the thing: what you just said about the simple, about the fair, easy to understand, those kind of things, no surprises. I think those are all really important. It's so hard to get there, Niclas. It's so hard for folks, right? And so my point here is, when you think of fair, I was thinking about what you were saying. Like, don't charge me for stuff that you don't have a lot to do with, right? And I've seen some overreaching on value with some companies where they say, "Hey, I'm going to charge you a percentage for all this total processing volume or whatever it is." And then there's this sort of pushback of like, well, wait a minute, like there's certain things that have nothing to do with you, and I don't want you profiting off of those things. But here's the thing: customers do want to pay you. They want you to be around, right? They want you to make a profit and all that stuff, but they don't want to pay you for things that they don't feel like you're responsible for, right? So this whole thing around attribution and are you responsible for this value? So how do you get around some of that? Because usage-based pricing is interesting, right? It's you're really enabling them to charge more for their usage. And usage-based is growing, and it allows them to manage complexity, right, Niclas? And so how do you get them to understand that you're providing that simple and fair value? You've peeled away certain fees that don't make sense. I get that. But is there something else you did to keep it fair? Because I think fair, it's very slippery for people to. Fair is fuzzy in my mind.
It is, and I mean, I don't think it's clear cut, and I'm sure there are different opinions on it as well, right? Sometimes I do think that you could definitely like find ways of doing usage and bill of consumptions or maybe outcomes. But what I do find sometimes is that it's very difficult to bill on outcomes because the outcomes are not shared. That's not the data we shared. Instead, we're looking at some activities or something, and then we charge on activity or some sort of consumption. But that is not really the outcome. That's not really the value. So I guess like finding that sort of middle ground where something is used for billing, but it's also very transparent and open to both parties, I think is a key component in that. And sometimes it's not that easy. But like so sometimes we've had discussions with companies, and they are saying like we only have 10 clients and they are worth 10 million each. The price you're suggesting doesn't really match that. Fine. Yeah, I mean, I can totally see that, right? As well. Like, yeah, I get that. But then we can at least, okay, so our intention was to map, the value you're getting. And now you're confronting that with something that the model is not built for. Maybe we can have a discussion. And I think that is also like what you can do if you're in a sales-led growth motion. That is the luxury you do have. Also, the complication you have, it depends on the situation, right? But I do think that it opens up to have that kind of discussion. And maybe you can then find a solution to that. And I think like when I'm saying like I think it's fair, it's based on the assumptions that we've been doing, and I'm very confident that I put in more time in making those assumptions and thinking about this than anyone else. Right. So
I think you have
I
to.
think I'm in at least a good position where we've spent some time on this. It's not totally like out of nowhere, but of course there might be assumptions that are not true here. So hey, let's talk about that then, and try to figure something out. But I think like with it would be quite ideal with like if you could measure outcomes, right? And be part of that.
Holy grail, right? I mean, hey, get the outcome, pay for that. There's a lot of talk about that. That actually is a good segue into the future, because I think with all this AI stuff happening,
Yeah.
outcomes and those outputs get a lot more attention, right? So let's move it to the future, because this is something that's interesting, right? It's not easy, like you said. There's a lot of stuff in the middle that's going on, and again, if the outcome, is it because of your software? Is it because of the people using the software? Is it because of my sales rep? Is it because of my CS
Yeah.
people?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then attributing that. And so a lot of talk about it. And let me give you the example, right? Let's use Intercom, and let's use AI agent that is really trying to resolve support calls or support cases. You can charge by the agent. You can charge by the number of cases, but they have gone all the way down to charging for resolved or resolutions, right? Which is some definition of case closed, right? And that takes it as far as they can go. But you've seen, actually, they used to charge by the agent before, right? Or by the user, and so on and so forth. So it's evolution kind of happened over time. And the market is somewhat accepting to, yeah, okay, fine, your AI resolved the case and made it a full-blown resolution. Therefore, you get credit for it. And this is the piece I'm trying to untangle, is what do you get credit for versus what you don't get credit for? Because if you don't get credit for it and you're charging for it, same thing like you were saying about revenue under management, all the other stuff, it falls apart.
Yeah.
So how are you seeing companies, now that you're implementing this across so many, how are you seeing them potentially move closer? They may not be at the very end of the spectrum, right? They may not be at the full outcome, but maybe they're getting closer, is kind of what I'm saying. Are you seeing that too? And if so, what are some examples of folks getting closer?
I do think there's promise to that. And I think like Intercom is a good example of it. I also feel like for most companies, it's so much uncertainty as well. Like Intercom is a really big company. So is Salesforce, so is HubSpot. I'm sure they can afford a few missteps here and there and work it out. And I think that is a problem for most companies, that, it's really uncertain territory. And I think people are very hesitant. So I think we're really seeing baby steps. I don't think we're seeing those big steps yet. I'm sure we will see them, but I think it will be a movement either by like the big companies pushing for, like you said, with Intercom, or really small players with nothing to lose and a lot of financial backing. Because there's a risk to this as well, right? I mean, with everything being variable, you don't really know about the future. And I think that goes the other way on the buyer side. I mean, if they say today, like, yeah, nice, let's do outcome based. And then in 2 years, the next company coming there with the same logic, they would be then replacing Intercom then. So they just need to be a bit cheaper than Intercom.
Yeah, because where else do you have to go once you get to the outcome, right? There's really nowhere else. Now it's a battle.
And then maybe that would be driving the prices down, and I guess I think that will create a counter movement where you do want to balance that with some certainty and some security as well. And I think that certainty and that security goes a bit both ways as well. Like, definitely from a seller standpoint or a vendor standpoint, you do like some security, so you know what to hire against, or you know what forecast to produce. But also on the buying side, like depending on the kind of system you're talking about, you definitely, I think you want to have different levels of security. And maybe that's not a real security. Maybe that's the feeling of security.
Perceived.
It could be that as well. But I do think we're seeing more outcome based from the companies doing more of a single use case kind of product, and a bit less from those who are doing more platforms. But maybe they're not as big as Intercom as well.
Not many companies are, but that makes a lot of sense. The security piece is psychological, Niclas, right? It's sort of, how do you appeal to that psychology of the buyer, right? Because no one wants to pay for something where they have no idea what they're going to end up paying at the end of the year. That's a human function. That's not a function of inputs, outputs, and other things like that. I mean, sure, those are the things you measure, But in the end, the uncertainty and the sort of apprehension to buy something where you're just not sure how to spend, that's a
No.
human dynamic, right?
Yeah. And I think that's the same thing as well. Like if you're a really big company and you're buying things, maybe you have one preference. Maybe if you're sort of a bit beyond startup and you're feeling like things are settling, you have one preference. And if you're really small, you have another one. If you're really small, you don't have the money. I need to know that it costs $5 next month. Otherwise, I can't really buy this, because I'm only going to look at like how much does this cost. And if you're like super big, it's like, well, for us, we're at that level where we have so much data and we really know what the outcome is. We know how to measure it. We know all the incoming parts of it. So we know that, I had a discussion with a company that not doing only software, but they're doing like gates for airports. Of course, it makes a whole lot of sense doing outcome-based billing of that, right? During the pandemic, okay, it was super bad for them as a vendor, but on the other hand, the airports, they didn't have any people going there, so they didn't have anyone going through the gates, so it was all unused. So that makes a whole lot of sense. And when like more and more flights are taking off, more passengers, more traffic, more business, pay more. So I do think there are a lot of good use cases for it. I think I'm just in general very much against like when it becomes trendy.
Yeah, I get your point.
Everyone wants to do the same thing. Then I like to stand on the.
That's right. Wait a minute. That's right. When everyone starts doing it, that usually means you got to do something else. I get it.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. Mainly because I think you're pointing out a very important psychological limitation to this equation, right? And at the very end, there needs to be some sensation, going back to what you were saying, of fairness, easy to understand. When this grows, I pay more. When this doesn't grow, I pay less, right? So there's that up and down, and then that blend of security and predictability, no surprise, but at the same time, they recognize that if something were to grow, at least they understand how that moves and why. And all that makes a much easier sales-led conversation, right? At the end of the day, man. One last big lesson before we start wrapping up here. What is the big lesson in everything that you've seen and learned now in pushing Younium and the growth and in the movement in usage-based pricing?
I definitely think that you should adopt some sort of variable pricing into it. Maybe a bit counter to what we just talked about. But I do find like the blend of it is a very good place to be in for most companies, at least for most like small, middle-sized companies, where you definitely do want some security, but you also want to get in. And I think like the whole usage-based pricing movement triggers you to think more about what is the specific value. How do we actually measure this? So I think also not only the end result of the pricing, but also the exercise of thinking about it and having to get that precise with what is the value is very useful for a lot of companies. And if you can put that into part of your pricing, I think that's great. And I think we're seeing that a lot, like that mixed or the hybrid kind of pricing.
Yeah, I think that strikes the right balance. And what you said, getting precise, right? And you got to get precise to get to the price. I think at the end of the day, right? Yeah. So that's a good one for folks to leave on, man, right? Yeah. Hey, thank you, Niclas, for sharing a lot of that insight and what you've seen and actually what you've done, like, and going through like the hard conversations and thinking and getting the why and being fair, evolving that over time. I think those are all really key things for our users, the listeners here to take away and to think about a little bit more what should be the reason why we're pricing and what we're about and how that aligns before jumping to the number. I think is a big one for folks to take away here. So I have to thank you, and I want to ask you, did you have some fun doing this today?
Definitely fun. It's one of my favorite topics.
You excellent. I'd love to have you back to just give us some updates. You keep on expanding and growing. You're probably going to change and take in all the new lessons from there.
Definitely.
So we'd love to have you back.
Yeah.
Cool,
we
man.
can talk about co-pilots and conversational insights and a lot of things. So, I mean, let's do that, man.
Yeah, the AI with that landscape in 2 years from now, who knows, right? Let me ask you this, man. I got one more question for you. It's my favorite question because we're all human, we're all people, right? I want to get to know Niclas a little bit more. Tell me your favorite song, your favorite jam growing up. What was it?
Yeah, I spend a lot of days now trying to come up with this, right? I love music. In the end, I settle on Levels by Avicii.
Oh,
Of a tribute also back to Sweden and Stockholm, since I've moved out for 2 years now. But also a bit of local, but also a global success. So
that was
I
classic.
think it's good energy in that song, all right?
Oh my goodness, the buildup. So from my perspective, right, it always tells me a little bit about where somebody thinks. So you're true. You love classics. You love good energy at the end of the day. So good to hear a little bit of that from you, Niclas. Thank again for coming on to the show, team. That was amazing, and thinking through in the rawness of pricing, peeling it back, making sure you get rid of all of those things that are viewed as unfair, things that are viewed that maybe you don't have a lot to do with that value, and getting very honest about what value you're contributing before you can really think about what to charge for. I think those were big lessons. And Niclas Lilja, who is the CEO, founder of Younium, seen it all. And by all means, please take those lessons back on Monday, get 1% better and improve and move away from that guesswork. And remember, stop guessing and start growing. Until next time.
Thank you and much love for listening to the Street Pricing Podcast with Marcos Rivera. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to learn more about capturing value, pick up a copy of Street Pricing on Amazon. Until next time.